What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? Hopefully everyone's having a great day. Beautiful little Tuesday or Wednesday. Well, I'm recording this on a Tuesday. You're probably watching this on a Wednesday. Usually on Wednesdays, I do a golf podcast, Go Low. A little passion project of mine, talking pro golf, PGA Tour, a little gambling. I will do that as well. That will come out a little later today. But because of the combine and so many GMs and coaches over the course of 48 hours talk, so much news happening, like we can't abandon what pays the bills here, and football is what runs the show around here. So we are going to dive in on some of my takeaways from the day. A lot happened. I watched a decent amount of the press conferences. Wasn't able to watch every second of every guy, but took a bunch of stories that I saw that I want to chime in on. So that will be the game plan today. It'll be a little NFL rapid fire. We will just hit some stories and kind of fly through. And then, tomorrow on Wednesday, bunch more GMs and coaches will talk as well, and we'll react to that for Thursday. So this is a fun week. A lot going on in Indianapolis. Kind of bummed. Little FOMO today that I couldn't be there, but got my marriage license this morning, so I got to do grown up things, and we will be back in 2026 with a vengeance. I promise you that. So let's dive in. Let's dive into what transpired today. I want to start with the big story that one of the best players in the NFL asked for a trade. And sometimes, and we've seen a lot of trade requests over the years from a lot of different players. When I was living a couple years ago in the Bay Area, Deebo Samuel made an impassioned trade request. And he ended up not getting traded. And he never was going to get traded. Last year, Brandon Aiyuk kind of did, but then every time they would trade him, he'd be like, no, let's stay. I thought watching Myles Garrett do the rounds at the Super Bowl. I mentioned this to Colin the other day. I thought it was like very measured. And honestly, when you heard him talk, you're like, yeah, I understand. If I was him, I would want to get the hell out of here too. And I think one major difference in football relative to, let's say, basketball, that when a player asks for a trade in the NBA, it sure as hell feels like they get traded. And constantly, when a guy makes a demand, you'd be like, why do you want to trade this guy? And then a week later, 2 weeks later, the offseason, whatever, he always gets traded. And it feels like a player run operation. Hell, Jimmy Butler, who has been incredible on the Warriors, lost it on Pat Riley and basically gave up, stopped doing anything. They kept suspending him, and then he was traded. Like, that's not usually how the NFL works. They don't let the players, at least historically, shove them around. It's a management run operation. And listen, these things can ebb and flow, and every individual case, is separate from one another. I'm not saying guys haven't demanded trades in the past and haven't been traded. But in this situation, you get a guy of this level, a Hall of Fame player, a guy who has a chance, if he stays healthy, to go down as one of the great players ever as a pass rusher, which a lot of people would argue is the second most important position behind quarterback. You're like, God, what are the Browns going to get from him? Because this guy sounds and pretty impassioned, put out a statement and then quadrupled down like he doesn't want to play there. Well, I'll say this about the Browns. They have not been like, yeah, we're open to offers. Give us a call. We'll call you right back. This is our asking price. Their general manager has said a while back, and he quadrupled down today, like, we're not trading this player. That is not in the plans for the Cleveland Browns. And I'm fascinated to watch the way this plays out because I think they could get an absolute haul for him. I've said over and over, I'm thinking multiple first rounds, a second round, and probably a player. I mean, you are getting a lot for a guy that is 29 years old. Typically, when you see that type haul, it's usually a guy 25, 26 years old. Once upon a time, Khalil Mack was traded from the Raiders. It was a second contract Usually it's the second contract guys. Like if the Cowboys were to put Micah Parsons truly on the trading block, you would get a ton because you're getting a guy going into their fourth, fifth season who you are giving the first big contract. Myles Garrett is a guy who would get his third contract, rookie contract. Then he got a massive contract. Now he wants a third contract. So usually when you get that third contract guy, you don't get as much. I don't think that's the case here. And I think if you're the Browns, like, listen, what I've said when it comes to Cleveland, I totally understand where Andrew Berry's coming from. You should never be in the business of getting rid of guys like Myles Garrett, whether you're a 1-win team or whether you're a 17-win team. Like the whole point of the sport is to acquire, extend, and have guys on your team like Myles Garrett. But the Browns are in a bad spot. And the other thing Andrew Berry mentioned today is like Deshaun Watson isn't playing this year. And let's face it, he's never playing for the Cleveland Browns again. I actually feel Deshaun Watson will never play in the NFL again. But I think this is a time when you can blow this bitch up. And you have the number 2 pick. You can trade him for a haul. I know it's not convenient. It's not something you want on your resume. But this is not a Luka trade where it's like, why did you do this? Like, this guy is asking for a trade. And I think this is a move that is not easy to make, but they are going to have every team in the NFL. And let's face it, most of the good teams willing to put a ton on the table. Like willing to trade you so much where it's like you are having serious meetings. And I wouldn't bet my life savings on them trading him, but I think there's a pretty good chance within the next couple weeks Myles Garrett is traded. And listen, I'll say this about the Browns. I think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski, like that is a good tandem. I do think those guys know what they're doing. And if they trade Myles Garrett, it's not because like it was just their idea. Like this is something he's pushing. So it's understandable when you make a move that, let's face it, Browns fans are not going to love. I mean, he's one of the more talented players the franchise has ever had. Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are. With the all-new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From dunks to assists to rebounds, get behind your favorite player and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like picking how many points your favorite player will have. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook and make your first pick. First time? Here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN, that's code JOHN, for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. But when I look at the Falcons, and this story I saw today, I saw this early in the morning when I was running around doing other life tasks. I just saw the headline. Raheem Morris says Kirk Cousins is going to be the backup. And when I'm getting ready for the show, I go to Roto World. They're the fantasy website, but they're kind of like a website version of Twitter where they just throw together a lot of stories and I can accumulate a lot of information fast because they kind of aggregate it all. And the GM also said that. Like, we plan on making Kirk Cousins the backup quarterback. I shorted the Falcons last year just partly because everyone was hanging a left. Everyone's like, the Atlanta Falcons are winning the division. I'm like, no chance. And I was right. Now, granted, I picked the Saints, but I just bet against, like, are we sure Kirk Cousins, Raheem Morris, this general manager that no one knows if is any good, are just going to win 10, 11 games? And it didn't happen. But today, like, Kirk Cousins has a no-trade clause. He is owed, I think, $10 million bonus here in the next couple of weeks. You would be on the hook for Kirk Cousins making $27.5 million to be the backup, which going into a season would be the highest paid backup in the history of the league by a wide, wide margin. Typically, backup quarterbacks, not like bridge quarterbacks. Sometimes bridge quarterbacks don't win the job. A guy you give $10 million or $15 million, maybe they get beat out by a rookie. Like that happens, right? Or what happened to Kirk Cousins last year, benched midseason. I'm talking about a guy that you go, he's not going to be getting number one reps in OTAs or training camp because he is the backup making 27. Never has happened and never will happen. Now, maybe one day if the cap is like $900 million, but That's embarrassing. And you acting because they're saying this, trying to get teams to, well, if you really want him, you're going to have to steal him from me. He's not, you can't trade him without Kirk Cousins saying yes. He's got that thing called a no trade clause that you gave him. And if you're Kirk Cousins, why would you want your salary to go on the next team's books when you can just force them to cut you and then you still get paid that same amount of money and you just go to the other team for a little bit more money and you allow them to sign more players and have a better team? I think the Atlanta Falcons have no fucking clue what they're doing. None. I mean, I think I thought today was pretty embarrassing. I really did. Now, it's one thing to talk tough if you do have some leverage, right? But they can't trade him without getting a thumbs up from Kirk Cousins. Listen, I think I saw Arthur Blank at TGL. He's an investor into the PGA Tour now, and he sitting there smiling. He has to be questioning. And listen, I get like they want to save a little face here. Like, you guys fucked up. You were wrong on this one. It's a disaster. And saying this today, I thought of all the things that were said in the combine, I thought this was the craziest thing by a country mile said. I actually don't even think there were that many things said that I thought, well, that's kind of weird. This was one of those like, what the fuck? I think the Falcons, like that organization, give me a break. Ain't gonna make the play. Listen, I'm a Michael Penix guy, so I'm rooting for Michael Penix. But I think the organization he's in, I mean, this guy comes from Washington, where he had Kalen DeBoer, all those wide receivers, and just a well-run operation. To this thing, I mean, what a joke. The 49ers. There was a story by Diana Rossini, who I texted a couple weeks ago to have on the podcast. She was going on vacation, and she's like, "You want to have come on? Are you at the combine?" I was like, "I'd love to have you, but I'm not going to the combine." So hopefully we'll get her sometime after the combine. I like Diana a lot, and I appreciate and admire any reporter that covers football that gets their information from general managers and coaches, because ultimately those people are the decision maker. And she had I don't know if it was a tweet. I saw the headline that she said teams have called and discussed or reached out to the 49ers about their willingness with Brandon Aiyuk. Would they trade him? And I thought, are they trying to get Brandon Aiyuk for like nothing? And the 49ers have already given him a bunch of money in the signing bonus, so they get him for cheap. Because my take would be one, under no unless the 49ers get like a first round pick, which I don't even think they would get a second day pick, given that his leg was snapped last year. He didn't just tear his ACL, like he had torn other ligaments. It was a bad injury. And he makes a ton of money. That while the Niners would bear the majority of like the cap disaster, you would still be owed in the next couple of years paying him some cash. Uh, I just think it makes no sense. And listen, the 49ers regret signing him. Yes, they do. And did they, obviously, the injury, no one wanted that to happen. Team, player, like no one wishes that upon any, but it did happen. And now they have this situation that's not ideal. But to me, he is not a tradable player. Uh, I can't imagine them trading a guy injured who is gonna ruin their cap space. I think I saw my guy David Lombardi, who covers uh, the 49ers. He's good. The 49ers have like $45 million in cap space, and if they were to trade him, they would lose like 30 of that with dead money because of this. So that's not happening. The other thing in 49er land that's happening, it was Tim Kawakami, who is just a mainstay in the Bay Area, like our biggest opinion columnist, covers everything, but specifically the Warriors and the 49ers. Like he's as dialed as anyone. I was listening to his podcast a couple days ago, taking my little dog for a walk. Well needed. She's got to lose some weight. Even though I think the vet told us that caloric deficit for dogs is actually more important, especially with small dogs, than walking. I don't know if that's true or not, but it was believable. And Loli's like, yeah, I don't even need to walk. Well, my point is, Kami on his podcast said that Kyle Shanahan was going to go to the combine because Kyle Shanahan is just always too good for the combine. I think since like 2019 or this first season they made the Super Bowl back, it would have been 2020. He was at the combine. I don't think he's been back. Now, granted, they've been playing late in the season. It's like they're in the Super Bowl or the conference championship game. He's on vacation or whatever. John Lynch is there. I'll give you a little bit of a pass, even though I still think you should go. You go 6-11, and you're basically off for the last 2 months. If Kawakami was told something and then Kyle Shanahan decided not to go to the combine, that's pretty embarrassing. But Grant who also covers the 49ers, he's got this big YouTube channel. He is going up to him and Kyle get after it a lot. Like they have butted heads many times. He is going up to every coach at the press conference, like Dan Campbell, Sean Payton, Andy Reid, and asking them why they value the combine, basically as like a bit, taking shots at Kyle, which honestly I thought was incredible. And I hope Kyle goes to the combine, because if he's not, like it's not just a bad look. Like that's low level. 2 months, you have the 11th pick. Your franchise is in somewhat turmoil. You had an awful season. You got to be there. I'm sorry. Like if I was texting someone today, Andy Reid and Nick Sirianni played in a game like 2 weeks ago, and Andy Reid's the best coach in the NFL, who has beaten you twice in Super Bowls. He's gonna go. He's gonna walk right into the Hall of Fame, and he goes to the combine every single year for the last 3.5 decades. Like if Belichick for 30 years going to the combine every single year. If those guys can go and find value in it, and even Sean Payton and every coach reiterated this thing when Grant Cohn was doing his thing. They said, I want to meet the players. Like that's the value you get. Like Andy's not in all these meetings with agents. That's Brett's job, right? But when you have, I saw some coaches say it was 45. It used to be 60. Maybe they shortened. I think they elongated the time from 15 to 20 minutes, but you don't get as many meetings. So you get 45 meetings now instead of 60, but they're all 20 minutes long instead of 15. That could be the case. Don't quote me on that. It's a really big deal to meet these players. Just like in any human interaction, and there's, listen, it's become controversial, with the Jamie Dimons and everyone of the world of, come back to the office. But there are some things in life that if you're going to invest millions of dollars into a human being, I would rather meet them in person than do a Zoom. And I hope that the story right now that he's not going turns out to be false, and he ends up showing up in a couple days. He doesn't need to be there today. He doesn't even need to do a press conference. But when the players start meeting and you start doing interviews, every head coach should go. It shouldn't even be a question. Can I tell you about my friends at Mando? They've taken care of me for a long time now. And listen, it's Arizona. It gets really hot, and I get very sweaty. And that's where my friends at Mando, they come in with the deodorant wipes. How about the deodorant spray? And just the whole body deodorant that you just put a little bit on. You can put it under your pitch. You can put it on your arms. You can put it on your balls. And I cannot recommend it enough. It's clinically proven to block odor all day. No one wants to smell. Created by a doctor, all products, baking soda free. So clinically proven to control odor better than a shower with soap. How do you beat that? 12 hours after a shower, you're still smelling good. I cannot recommend these guys enough. Mando Starter Pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick of deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes. Love those wipes. And free shipping. As a special offer for our listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off starter pack using the code JOHN, that's JOHN, at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. Another big topic today, the Tush Push. A lot of coaches took some shots at the Tush Push. The Green Bay Packers, I guess, reached, I don't know if because in a couple weeks, the owners' meetings basically got the ball rolling of trying to ban the Tush Push, which I don't know exactly how they would do. Maybe not allow you to be right behind the quarterback. Whatever, make some rule. My overall take on the Tush Push is I don't love it because I do feel it's inevitable. But I also go, if it's so easy to do, shouldn't every team be able to do? But of course they can't. And even Andy Reid said, like, I understand the injury concern, but like, if we could do it, we'd do it. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't feel that much, I would say, pity or I feel for these other teams that can't stop it. It sucks. And it definitely sucks when your team's playing them or you're betting against them and they go into that position. I saw Spytech say today, well, unless you got Vita Vea, you're probably not stopping it. But like, I just think everyone's bitching and moaning over this thing that it's like, I don't know. And even Sirianni was kind of said he was insulted by it because of how much time they have spent, I would say, building up this play, practicing the play. And let's face it, a huge, um, their big point of difference on the tush push is their quarterback. He can squat like 8 million pounds. And we saw Josh Allen, who in theory should be like one of the bigger, stronger quarterbacks of all time. Yet they couldn't execute a short yardage, their version of the tush push quarterback sneak to save their life in the biggest game of their season. So I think everyone's all worked up. And that's what happens. Like anytime you're dominating in life, this happens in the private sector and business all the time. People coming at you. For a long time, depending on who was in charge, the government starts coming after you. Your local government comes after you. People start suing you. It's like usually people aren't suing companies that aren't doing well. They don't have any money. They're going after the big dogs. No different in sports. When you start dominating and you win big, they say the wind blows the hardest at the top of the mountain. And that's what's happening here with the Eagles. The Jags, I watched them, the headline a couple days ago that they hired 34-year-old from the Rams, who I'll be honest, I'd never heard of. I watched a little of his press conference yesterday with Shad Khan. I watched some clips today of him at the combine. I do think I understand what they're doing. They interviewed a bunch of guys that were highly viewed around the league, guys that were number twos or threes at Super Bowl and playoff level teams, and they hired the most impressive. But they are going into this season with two guys who have never done the role, who are 34 and 39 years old. And even hiring Tony Baselli to be like kind of right next to them is, I don't even know what technically his role is. I mean, I've seen some people say he's in charge of a lot of like PR and logistics and some other stuff and just to help out the coaches. And all three guys report to the owner. None of them have ever had these roles. And I think sometimes guys start from scratch, right? Let's use the 49ers, for example. Kyle Shanahan had never been a head coach. John Lynch had never been a general manager. Kyle Shanahan had been an offensive coordinator for like over a decade. And John Lynch was a Hall of Fame player who then started studying with John Elway and the Broncos as he was doing broadcasting stuff. So I just think it's a lot of pressure on, and even when Sean McVay got hired to the Rams at 31, 32 years old, like Les Snead had been a general manager for a while. Howie had just took Sirianni, right? No one, I'd never heard of Nick Sirianni. Well, what it was a huge advantage for the Eagles. Howie Roseman had done the job for a long time. I just think it's very, very difficult in this profession to kind of learn on the fly when you're under 40. Doesn't mean it can't be done. And I'm not against hiring younger people, but I feel like look at the Raiders. I think John Spytek, who has been one of the most highly valued up and coming future GMs for several years now. Like he once Adam Peters got hired last year, it felt like he was that guy. Like John Spytek was bound to be a general manager. He'd be the first to tell you it's a huge, huge benefit as a first time general manager to every day work with Pete Carroll, who's been a head coach for like 3 decades. So it's like I think the Jags, obviously these two individuals are talented. Liam Cohen's a good play caller. This Gladstone character, I'm sure, is really bright, really impressive. It's tough, man. It's really, really hard to learn on the job, especially at a place that is like historically pretty dysfunctional and loses a lot. John Snyder's called Geno Smith his guy and said there are going to be contract negotiations. I I I, I don't know, man. I think that one's pretty risky. You're talking about a guy who's on a 3 year, $75 million contract, then who played pretty well over the course of a couple seasons and was a big reason you were, a playoff level team and winning 9, 10 games. If he was making 25 million, what's he going to want? 35, $40 million? I get that's kind of the going rate, but I don't know. That feels tough, man. That feels tough. It'll be fascinating. Maybe he's just saying that because that's easy thing to say right now. But I think that Seattle's kind of in this risky spot. 3 for 75, incredible deal. Now it's like, is Geno Smith giving you a deal? I don't know. The Ravens and Justin Tucker. I think it's pretty simple when it comes to sports. If you are a great player, you can get away with a lot. And I'm not talking just about doing stupid shit, showing up late. I'm talking about like criminal activity. Like this is we're not teaching moral lessons here in pro sports. This is a black and white business. You're trying to make money and win games. This is very like there are two sides to the coin. People act like there's a bunch of gray area. Yeah, there's only gray area when a guy sucks. It's like, yeah, we'll let this play out. We'll cut him, right? The reason Deshaun Watson was having all those opportunities with the situation he was in was because the guys viewed, people around the league viewed him as a superstar. They viewed Deshaun Watson as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. If Deshaun Watson was a bad player and wanted to trade out of Houston, it would not have been the same. No one would have touched him. That's why I believe now, with all the toxicity around him, he will never play another snap in the NFL. If he was good, I would not say that. To me, Justin Tucker, I think the Ravens, this thing, like Deshaun, it's just he said, she said, a lot of women coming out against him, they would have defended him. If he's in the peak of his powers, prime, one of the great kickers, you could argue the best kicker of all time, most talented kicker, I think they would have had no problem. We'll let the judicial system play out, which in fairness, media members get so mad. Like the teams, like this is not our job. We have to let it play out. We'll see what happens. We don't know. We weren't there. But he's not good anymore. And he missed a ton of kicks last year. So I think like I'd probably just cut him. I wouldn't even want the headache. And listen, sometimes that's unfair. It happened to Matt Ariza, who was the rookie punter, who the fucking girl made it up. Now, this was only one. This was one human being story against another. This was a he said, she said. Deshaun Watson and Tucker is like a long list of women with the massage therapy stuff. I just think you start missing kicks, like that's see ya. You ain't worth the headache anymore. Couple other things. Khalil Shakir, who I think someone asked me about in the mailbag, signed a extension today, $32 million. Really good player, excellent after the catch. Just a stud player from Boise State. I think teams love doing contracts like this. There's a winning player, a guy who's extremely productive, especially a guy who's going to catch 80 balls a year. I think last year was 74 balls. Wouldn't shock me if he averages 75 to 85 for the next decade. And you can get this guy $32 million guaranteed. Now, he had a lot less yards. Brandon Aiyuk caught the same amount of balls last year, and he got $75 million guaranteed. So it's like these are the type contracts you love to sign. And when you get a guy who's drafted in the mid rounds, it's hard for them to, turn down that type of money. And last but not least, I saw Zach Taylor getting interviewed today. I think he's in a tough spot because the quarterback's putting a lot of pressure on him. He wants all these guys re-signed. We've talked a lot about this. I think you've got to be very, very careful about having a really, really top-heavy team. Now, it's easier to do when Joe Burrow's your quarterback. We've seen it with the Cowboys. When Dak's your quarterback, it can be much more of a slippery slope. So if you are going to have a top-heavy team, if you got Mahomes, if you got Lamar, if you got Josh, if you got Burrow, it's like much easier to stomach. But I think it's one thing to have a top-heavy team with like four guys at different positions. I think when you get a redundant position, and ultimately that's what T. Higgins and Jamar are. I mean, they're different players, but like, do you want to invest that much money in the wide receiver position? I watched Howie Roseman talk in his press conference. He says they have an unhealthy obsession with the line of scrimmage. An unhealthy obsession with the line of scrimmage. They constantly think about offensive linemen and defensive linemen. That doesn't mean they don't value skill positions. They have multiple wide receivers. But like neither of them, like Jamar Chase is going to get probably as much money as A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith guaranteed got combined. So I just think I'm all for re-signing guys you draft and you develop and that are big-time players and high character guys. But this is also a business, and you have to make difficult decisions. And I think Cincinnati, and you should be uncomfortable because anytime you got a guy named Joe Burrow and you're missing the playoffs, like that's an organizational failure. But this is a very, very, this has to be very uncomfortable for the organization.